Today you'll hear about a Russian gangster wannabe and how his story curiously overlaps with 3 devious and murderous American teenage girls. Later in the show, you'll wonder with a sense of disbelief and abject horror how a Yale-educated spy could massacre his nearest and dearest with a ball-peen hammer and then vanish into thin air like a speck of dust. The latter mystery is an absolute cracker, an unbelievably dark tale we're still trying to wrap our heads around. You're going to hear some messed up stories today, but you never know, you might have seen one of these people. If so, you could become the beneficiary of a cash reward. Since there seems to be some confusion about this, we'll quickly explain what Interpol is. It consists of 195 member states. Interpol's website explains, "We connect police around the world, both technically and in person, bridging jurisdictions, time zones, and languages. They have access to 19 databases. Millions of messages are sent through what Interpol calls a web-based police communication system. Unlike, say, the FBI, Interpol doesn't go around busting down doors and arresting people, it just helps find people. The organization does keep a wanted list, called the Red Notice List, which contains people that a country wants located and arrested. Notably, a red notice is not an arrest warrant. They are more like an international notice, supplying all the relevant information about the criminal. Interpol does not look for them in the physical sense. It's up to local police forces to do that. The red notices make up the longest list of notices for Interpol. From 2014 to 2021, there were anywhere from 10,718 to 13,516 people on the red notice list. There are currently 249 people on the red notice list wanted by the Americans, compared to 104 people who are Americans. We can't possibly talk about all of them, so we picked what you might consider to be the worst of the worst, or at least the most interesting, finishing with the worst of them all. Number 15. Canada Controversy. Florida woman Denise Harvey was in her 40s when she had what she calls a consensual relationship with a 16-year-old boy who played on her son's baseball team. She's now on Interpol's Red Notice list because of that. This happened in 2008, and in 2009 she, her husband, and her son fled to Canada, where what she did is not considered a crime. In some U.S. states, it might also not be a crime either due to the differences in the age of consent. Still, in Florida, if the accused is over the age of 24, they are not allowed to have an intimate relationship with someone that young. And if the accused is in a position of authority, as Harvey was, the age of consent is 18. Her lawyers have claimed that the 30-year prison sentence she's looking at in the U.S. should be deemed cruel and unusual. Right now, she's still on the red notice, but a free woman. We thought we'd open the show with a good example of how red notices don't always lead to extraditions. Number 14. Keeping a low profile. It's strange how some people who distinctly stand out in a crowd manage to evade the law for so long. Listen to this description of a man on Interpol's website. He's somehow not been seen for well over a decade. Tran may weigh 47 to 61 kilograms and may have facial hair, including a mustache. Tran has several tattoos, including a design with a tiger across his left biceps and shoulder going onto his back, multiple designs over his entire back, with Thug tattooed low on his back, Tran on top of his right wrist, and a large A on his torso above Warriors in script. He might as well have fixed a flashing target to his head. His full name is Kim Ngoc Tran. In 2009, when he was 29 years old, he was involved in an incident in San Jose, California, in which he and 2 others opened fire on a group of men. 2 were injured and a third man, 20-year-old Nam Hong Mai, was killed. Tran is a Vietnamese national, but he had permission to work in the U.S. at the time of the crime. His paperwork is probably expired by now, so authorities think he likely escaped to Vietnam and is currently residing there. This next person will give you the creeps. Number 13. A big fish out of muddy water. Laurie John Trites is hard to miss since he weighs about 300 pounds and would tower over most people at a mighty 6'7". In 1998, this former swimming champion and founder of the Trident Aquatic Club was the head swimming coach at a college in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He was by all accounts an excellent swimmer, a 4-time Big East champion, an 8-time New England champion, competing in his college days in the 100 and 200-yard backstroke. That year, a group of women found a videotape recorder in the locker room. On the tape, they saw themselves and heard their own voices. Turned out the coach had been secretly filming them for quite a few months. Police subsequently charged him with 6 counts of violating the state's wiretap law. The general consensus across the legal world of most countries states it's legal to film someone in a public place if there is no reasonable expectation that they're in a private environment. People end up on other people's videos all the time, but it is very, very illegal to film someone in a private space when there's an expectation that the people being filmed won't want to be filmed. Trites was last seen on January 30, 1998 in Philadelphia, when he withdrew a large amount of money from a bank and disappeared. He left behind a wife who was going on to divorce him anyway. He left his apartment and all of his clothes, and he also left behind his car, a leased Mercury Mountaineer, and in it police found a wallet, credit cards, and his laptop. That might sound strange to you, but it's what people do when they want to vanish. One thing he did keep was his passport. The FBI said it's hard to miss him given his size. The agency said wherever he might be, it's likely he's still involved with swimming. He might also be teaching golf, since he had been a golf coach as well as a swimming coach. The FBI says he may be living under the name of John Trites, but his other aliases include John Morgan and Buddy. He has ties with New Mexico, Connecticut, Florida, Massachusetts, as well as Pennsylvania, although it's suspected he might have gone as far as Canada, Trinidad, or even the Bahamas. There's no reason to think he's dead, so this big guy is very likely in a city or town near someone watching this video today. The FBI has issued its familiar warning for Trites. Do not attempt to apprehend this person yourself. He should be considered armed and dangerous. So if you've seen him, go to the FBI website or contact your nearest consulate if abroad. You might wonder how he's still on the run. Law enforcement says criminals are usually caught because they use computers or banks, but it's very hard to find someone who lives under a new identity and has cut off all ties with their past. Still, the FBI has said it's caught 163 people who've appeared on its most wanted list thanks to people sending in information. It helps that the agency may give someone up to $250,000 for that information. The same applies for Trites and his case, but the FBI didn't say just how much he'd be compensated for information leading to his arrest. The next case is horrific, but it comes with some good news at least. Number 12. Potential serial killer? The FBI says on any given day, around 80,000 people will go missing in the U.S. Most of them will be found, but each year, U.S. authorities find an estimated 4,400 John or Jane Does, meaning bodies without a name. After 1 year, about 1,000 will remain unidentified. Another estimate from the FBI is this: there could be 25 to 50 serial killers on the loose in the USA each year. Now let's talk about the case of John Lightus, an American Nicaraguan who might be a serial killer. We say might because police have only convicted him of one murder, but his crimes against women in the U.S. go back decades. He's also wanted in Nicaragua for crimes against women, as well as robbery. The U.S. has him in confinement at the moment, but Nicaragua still wants him, so he's on the red notice list. In 2016, when he was 54, he was sentenced to 45 years for kidnapping, torturing, and murdering a 30-year-old homeless woman whose body was found in a ditch in DeLand, Florida. Just days before he killed her, he picked up a young homeless woman outside a 7-Eleven and offered her illegal substances. He proceeded to take her to a private place at knife point, where he hogtied her and tortured her for 12 hours. This is a bad man. Police later discovered that he had convictions for violent crimes against women going back to 1986 when he was arrested and detained in New York. He also had a stalking conviction in Orange County, Florida in 2009. Seems he chose the most vulnerable women, people who after they're murdered might become Jane Does, or in the parlance of academics, might become the less dead, since not a great number of people are concerned about them. It's hard to imagine that this is all Lightus did during all of his years on the loose. Given the extremeness of the crimes he was arrested for, we think there's a chance this guy is guilty of more crimes. There's little chance he'll be sent back to Nicaragua to face the music there, but at least you can sleep safe knowing he'll never see the light of day again in the U.S. Help catch this next guy and a reward of $250,000 could be coming your way. Number 11. The Violent Vegan. 45-year-old Daniel Andreas Sandiego is not your typical criminal. He's been called a mostly straight-laced kind of guy, but one who's taken his love for animals to the extreme. FBI calls him an animal rights extremist, an educated man who became part of the so-called straight edge movement. This is a movement linked to hardcore punk music whose adherents swear to go without alcohol, tobacco, recreational drugs, or promiscuous sex, the antithesis of what punk bands like the Sex Pistols stood for. They sound like Puritan punks, inspired by a 1981 46-second song titled Straight Edge by the punk band Minor Threat. Some people involved with the movement have also embraced hardcore veganism. A few of them started a band called Vegan Reich and said they were dedicated to the vegan jihad movement, part of a so-called hardline subculture. This was the life of Daniel Sandiego. On August 28, 2003, just before sunrise, 2 homemade pipe bombs exploded at the headquarters of the Chiron Corporation, a biotechnology outfit based in Emeryville, California. The first one went off, but it took some time for the second one to go off. That second one was time delayed, which led the authorities to think whoever set this attack up wanted the authorities who responded to the first blast to get seriously hurt. The FBI later said in an interview they were well-built, very sophisticated devices. They were not made with garbage. He actually went out and bought chemicals. You have to know what you're doing to build a bomb like this. A month later, they say he left a nail bomb at the Shackley Corporation headquarters in California. This company makes products such as vitamins and shampoos, but it, like the other company, worked with a British research firm named Huntington Life Sciences. This company tests products on animals, mostly mice and rats, but also birds, fish, and some other non-specified animals. Shackley said it has nothing to do with animal testing, but it got hit nonetheless. In 2003, the FBI had San Diego, described by his landlord as a very nice guy, under around-the-clock surveillance. On October 6 that year, he parked his car somewhere in San Francisco, and he's never been seen again. Not by law enforcement, anyway. He's described as 6 feet in height, weighs about 160 pounds. The FBI describes his tattoos as a round image of burning hillsides in the center of his chest with the words "It only takes a spark" printed in a semicircle below, burning and collapsing buildings on the sides of his abdomen and back, and a single leafless tree rising from a road in the center of his lower back. The agency says he is smart, a skilled sailor, and has experience in international travel. He might carry a handgun and should be treated as armed and dangerous. We imagine he's not half as dangerous as this next person. Number 10. The Disguise Artist. In December 2016, police in Chicago discovered a body of a lawyer and a father of two named Victor Higar Patel. He'd been strangled. An investigation found that a man named John Penalagan, a Filipino with U.S. citizenship, had set up a business meeting with Patel at Patel's office prior to the incident. Penalagan entered the building wearing a disguise, sporting a trench coat, a surgical mask, and a hat, as well as carrying a case. His appointment was not made under his real name, since Patel was at the time representing someone who had filed a civil case against Penalagan. The Chicago Tribune later wrote, "The victim's widow, Amy Patel, told the Chicago Tribune in 2017 that she believed her husband had damaging information about Penalagan's business dealings." When Penalagan entered Patel's office, he attacked him, strangling him to death. While the disguise did indeed hide Penalagan's identity, the police had Penalagan as a person of interest due to the court case. It became obvious something was wrong when Penalagan was arrested at the Canadian border for attempting to take a handgun into Canada. He was sent back to the U.S., where police later talked to him about Patel's death, but didn't have enough evidence to keep him in custody. After executing a search warrant of his house, police had enough to charge him, but around that time it's believed Penalagan had already crossed the border to Mexico. And with his dual citizenship for the US and the Republic of the Philippines, his life as a fugitive is made a lot easier. He might be in the Philippines right now, although his family has said they haven't seen him and that he could be anywhere. Maybe you've seen him. He's described as Asian with black hair and brown eyes, standing at 5 foot 5 inches and weighing 150 pounds. He's considered bald and might have a scar on his neck. It's also suspected he has a goatee. He might also be using the alias Reynaldo Cabrera. Given the nature of his alleged crime, he should be considered dangerous and not to be approached. Now for another eco-terrorist, one with a $50,000 tag on her head. Number 9. The Escape Artist. Josephine Sunshine Overacre is accused of being a domestic terrorist. She's now 52, but she's been known to use an ID that says she was born on November 19, 1974, October 4, 1971, and November 4, 1971. She has several known aliases including Lisa Rochelle Quintana, Lisa R. Quintana, Maria Rochelle Quintana, Maria Quintana, Osha, Joe, China, Josie, and Mo. Overacre was allegedly involved in a series of arson attacks, which she and others carried out for the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front. She was part of a smaller group known as the Family, but now her co-defendants in the family have all been arrested. She is the only one left. She's wanted for crimes that occurred in Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado, and Wyoming. It's thought that she had a hand in one of the largest eco-arson attacks on U.S. soil, the Vail Ski Resort attack in Colorado on October 19, 1998. The attack, it seems, was motivated by the resort's planned expansion. No one was hurt, but it did result in about $12 million worth of damage. 6 people have since been sent to prison, but Overacre evaded the authorities and is thought to have possibly gone to Spain since she speaks Spanish fluently. At 5'3" and just 130 pounds, she is of a slight build. The FBI believes she might be working as a firefighter, a midwife, a sheep tender, or a masseuse. On the website, the FBI states, Overacre has a large unknown tattoo on her upper left arm and has a very large bird tattoo stretching from her right upper arm across her upper back. She has scars on her left ankle, right calf, and right thigh. Authorities don't think she is a very dangerous person, but she sure as hell is an escape risk. Number 8. The Girlfriend Killer. Robert Lee King has been on the run from cops in Memphis, Tennessee for a long time. On December 1, 2005, he allegedly murdered his lover, Dorothy Smith, and then attempted to murder her 20-year-old daughter, Diana. Diana survived to tell the tale, explaining that she was woken up at about 4 a.m. to screaming and shouting. She proceeded to go into her mother's bedroom, where King was pummeling her mom. Diana ran away hoping to get help, but King ran after her. She locked herself in her bedroom, but King, in a flurry of rage, broke down the door. He then stabbed her in the neck with a sharp object, leaving her for dead. Luckily for young Diana, the stab wound wasn't fatal. When she was sure that King had left the house, she went to her mother's bedroom to find that she too had been stabbed in the neck. She wasn't as lucky as Diana and died shortly after she was stabbed. Diana was in critical condition for a while but pulled through and was able to identify King. U.S. Marshals are now after him and believe there's every chance he's hiding in plain sight. He's described as black, 6'2" with black hair and brown eyes. When he went on the run, he was about 185 pounds. Police say he has a tattoo of an upside-down crown with the name Victoria on his left arm. Underneath that, he has a picture of a horseshoe and his own name, Robert. He's known to use the name Robert West, and police think he might still be in the Memphis area, although he may have moved to Greenville, Mississippi, Racine, Wisconsin, Chicago, or Minneapolis. He's almost 60 now, and it's thought he might have lost much of his hair and certainly gone gray. There's a reward of up to $25,000 for anyone who can supply information leading directly to his arrest. It seems people do get paid, but not always the full amount. That might depend on how good the tip is. In 2011, when someone tipped off the FBI about former top 10 fugitive James Whitey Bulger, they got a cool $2.1 million, with $100,000 of that for the arrest of Bulger's companion, Catherine Grieg. Number 7. Russian Gangster or Wayward Geek. Now let's talk about Leonid Ilyich Kogan, a Russian immigrant and a software engineer. Well, an article in a San Francisco newspaper says he's Russian, but we suspect they got that wrong. Authorities believe he's actually Ukrainian, born in the city of Odessa. It seems in the U.S., besides working as an engineer, he had ambitions of becoming a notable character in the nightclub scene as a concert or party promoter. That all sounds innocent enough, but on September 11, 2005, Kogan and his two friends stormed into a nightclub, the Avalon in Santa Clara, demanding money from another concert promoter, a 22-year-old named Nikita Kozlovsky. It seems that these men knew each other. Kogan said he just wanted to talk business, but soon he and his buddies were strong-arming Kozlovsky out of the club, where around 450 people were still partying. They shoved him into the back of Kogan's brand-new Mercedes and took him on a trip down the 101 freeway while making him an offer he couldn't refuse. One of the men tightened a chokehold around Kozlovsky's neck as Kogan told him in no uncertain terms that from now on, when Kozlovsky put on a party at a club, he'd be paying Kogan a good amount of his takings. Interestingly, Kogan told Kozlovsky that if he refused to comply with the order, he'd end up the same way as Eugene Gorenman, a 27-year-old Russian immigrant in San Francisco who was found dead at Fort Funston in the southwestern corner of the city on March 29, 2004. That might sound like the work of the Russian mafia, but that seems less likely when you know Gorenman was a UC Berkeley graduate who had a good job as a computer engineer with Pacific Gas and Electric Co. Gorenman had actually been lured to Fort Funston by 3 teenage girls who, after flirting with him, pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. They took his wallet and credit card and left him there. For this execution, they got away with $20 between the 3 of them. Kozlovsky ended up agreeing to make the payments and handed Kogan $1,400 the next day, but he also went straight to the cops. Kogan was soon arrested on kidnapping charges, but after his bail was reduced from $5 million to $250,000, he disappeared, possibly to Mexico, although it is possible that he might have headed to Russia or Ukraine. His accomplices were also arrested, both men who'd come to the U.S. to study, not to be gangsters. Kogan is now in his early 40s, he's stocky, weighing 180 pounds and standing at 5 feet 8. He has brown hair and brown eyes and still speaks with a strong, distinct accent. Now for someone who you might consider much more armed and dangerous. Number 6. American Murderer. This is the story of a man named Jason Derek Brown. He's the only person on this list who, to our knowledge, has a drama movie made about him, a movie titled American Murderer. The reason why the director chose to depict Brown's life is because he always thought that Brown looked very out of place on the FBI's most wanted list, a surfer dude next to the likes of Whitey Bulger and Osama bin Laden. Brown was removed from the list in 2022, but he is still very much wanted by the FBI and still appears on Interpol's Red Notice list. Brown's background was in toys. To outsiders, he was doing well, but his businesses were actually crumbling, and he was in debt. Despite this, he had a taste for luxury, for things he evidently couldn't afford. In 2004, he bought a .45 caliber Glock semi-automatic handgun and some expensive high-powered rounds. He took a firearms instruction course and 2 weeks later became a cold-blooded killer. On November 29th, Brown shot and killed 24-year-old Robert Keith Palomares as Palomares was taking the deposits from an AMC theater in Phoenix, Arizona to his armored car. Brown made sure Palomares was dead, shooting 5 rounds into his head, and then he took off with a bag containing $56,000. His getaway vehicle was a bicycle parked in a nearby alley. Police would later take Brown's fingerprints from the bike. Brown has been on the run since. Now at age 52, he might be going under the name Jason D. Brown, Derek Brown, Greg Johnson, Harline Johnson, Greg Harline Johnson, John Brown, or Jay Brown. He has blonde hair and blue eyes, he's 5'10", and weighs approximately 180 pounds. He might have become a businessman again, perhaps in relation to his favorite sports of golf, skiing, or snowboarding. He's fluent in French, so authorities have stated that he could have made his getaway to a French-speaking nation. He might also be in Mexico and maybe even California, Arizona, or Utah. The FBI says on its website, Brown enjoys being the center of attention and has been known to frequent nightclubs where he enjoys showing off his high-priced vehicles, boats, and other toys. Considering the brutality of his execution-style murder, he absolutely should not be approached. If you know anything, get in touch with the FBI's hotline or your nearest U.S. embassy or consulate. The reward stands at $200,000. Number 5. Escalation. Paul Sung-ha Kim, born on August 11, 1991, is thought to have belonged to the Chinese-American street gang, the Huaqing. On the weekend of July 31, 2007, Kim, who was known by his friends as Snoop or Snoops, went to a party to celebrate a girl's 18th birthday. The house, located in Roland Heights, California, was packed with youngsters, maybe about 200 in all, firing down as much booze as they could. Never a good mix when testosterone levels are raging. Kim rolled into the party with his buddies, each about his age, 16, all dressed in gang attire. As the booze flowed, Kim got into an argument with a 17-year-old guy named Bu Lee. At around 1:30 a.m., unkind words quickly evolved into physical rage. The fight flowed into the street, where Bu was stabbed, as was one of his friends. That was the end of Bu's life. Witnesses say he staggered toward his car and bled out there. The other victim survived. Kim's been on the run ever since. He's 5'4", and at the time of the crime weighed about 141 pounds. He's Asian, has black hair and brown eyes, and could be anywhere in the US or even Mexico. That's all the information authorities provide on Kim. Now for a story that should be turned into a Hollywood movie. Number 4. The Air Pirate. We're sure you've all heard of D.B. Cooper, but have you heard of his female counterpart, Catherine Marie Kerkow? Described in the media as an all-American girl, Ms. Kerkow boarded Western Airlines Flight 701 from Los Angeles to Seattle on June 2, 1972, with an accomplice, a Vietnam War vet named Willie Roger Holder. The two claimed they had a bomb in an attaché case. In a note passed to one of the cabin staff, it was written, "Success through death, except the captain will leave the cabin. There are 4 of us and 2 bombs, do as you're told, and no shooting will take place." They said they'd blow the plane and everyone on it up unless they were given $500,000, about $3.6 million in today's money. And political activist Angela Davis, then on trial, was released. Davis was acquitted 2 days later, but that had nothing to do with the hijacking. The plane landed in San Francisco and half the passengers were allowed to get off, but the rest flew on to New York to refuel. At some point in the flight, according to Holder, they smoked cannabis and joined the Mile High Club. They then flew on to Algeria, where the couple was given political asylum. In Algeria, they linked up with 2 members of the International Black Panther Party, but by all accounts, it didn't turn out so well. Holder phoned an American newspaper and explained, "We expect to be killed off any day. Catherine and I. They've got the guns and they've got the money." It's known that Holder suffered from severe anxiety. The money, minus $12,000, was later returned to U.S. authorities. After using counterfeit passports to get into France, the two lived under the names of Levi and Janice Forte. But Holder could never settle due to PTSD related to his Vietnam combat experiences. He returned to the U.S. in 1986, where the FBI arrested him as soon as he got off the plane. He spent just 2 years in prison for the crime. Kirkhow could be using the name Janice Ann Forte, Odile Ann Pess, Odile Pess, or Catherine Marie Kirkhow. She's 5 feet 5 and might weigh about 115 pounds. She has a pale complexion with brown hair and brown eyes, and the FBI says she could now be hiding out in Oregon, France, Switzerland, Algeria, Jordan, or Cuba. The FBI does say she should be considered armed and dangerous, but now at the age of 72, we imagine she is definitely not as dangerous as this next guy. Number 3. The Survivalist. On paper, at first glance, William Robert Fisher might sound like an upstanding member of society. He'd served in the Navy, worked as a firefighter and in the medical field, and attended weekly Bible classes. But something rotten lay at the core of Fisher's soul. Perhaps part of it was due to the fact that his dream of joining the Navy SEALs was crushed by a brutal rejection. He was full of anger and resentment, evidenced by the fact that he took great pleasure in harming animals. He was violent and controlling with his wife. The two could be heard screaming at each other from down the road. "You're worthless," his wife would shout. "I could have done better than you. We should get a divorce." Then something snapped. Fisher and his wife were heard arguing about 10 p.m. on April 9, 2001. 43 minutes later, he was seen drawing $280 from an ATM. Police believe at this point he just murdered his entire family at their house in Scottsdale, Arizona. His wife had been shot in the back of the head. He also slit the throats of his 2 kids, 12-year-old Brittany and 10-year-old Bobby. At some point, Fisher lit a candle. He then pulled out the gas line from the furnace and allowed the gas to fill the house as he made his escape. At around 8:42 a.m., the house exploded. Who knows where he went after that? There are plenty of theories. Some say he died soon after, possibly inside a vast cave complex. Other theories say he used his survivalist skills to live in the wilderness. Despite the FBI putting up $100,000 for information leading to his arrest, and despite hundreds of possible sightings, he remains at large. Some think it's unlikely he survived all that time in the wilderness, living off the land and enduring 22 years of winters. It's likely if he is still alive, he's living under a new name, possibly doing odd jobs. The sad fact is the FBI doesn't even have his DNA profile. Maybe you've seen him. Due to an injury from his firefighting days, he suffers from noticeable chronic pain. He has a scar on his back and a gold tooth. But considering he's been evading the law for so long, we doubt he's had the dental care to keep that gold tooth in. He's 62 years old, standing at 6 feet, and weighs about 190 pounds. The $100,000 is still up for grabs for anyone who might have seen him. Goes without saying, don't approach this man. He will very likely be armed, and he is considered very dangerous. Now for the second craziest story on this list. Number 2. The Robber Reverend. George Edward Wright, born March 29, 1943, has quite a colorful rap sheet. In 1962, when Wright was just 19, he and 3 accomplices, their face hidden with women's pantyhose, went on an armed robbery spree in New Jersey, which ended with a World War II veteran being fatally shot. Wright didn't pull the trigger that killed that man, but he ended up being sentenced to 15 to 30 years in prison. In 1970, he evidently had enough of prison, the former Leesburg State Prison in New Jersey. Wright and a man named George Brown, also a convicted armed robber, stole the prison warden's car to make their getaway. Reports say that they made it to Detroit, where they joined the Black Liberation Army. This was already quite the life of crime, but Wright was not done by a long shot. On July 31, 1972, he was part of a 5-person crew that hijacked Delta Airlines Flight 841. Wright had boarded dressed in the garb of a priest under the name of Reverend Larry Darnell Burgess. Hidden in the hollowed-out Bible he brought on board was a handgun. One of the passengers later explained, "They said they were revolutionaries, that America is a decadent society, and they didn't want to live here anymore. When they landed in Boston, they were given $1 million in ransom and also got cheese and ham sandwiches, apples, and cigarettes." After flying to Algeria, in what passengers later said was a cloud of weed smoke, the passengers were allowed to disembark. The Algerians took the plane, took the ransom money, and returned it all to the US, but they allowed the hijackers to flee. In 1976, 4 of the hijackers were arrested. His 2 male accomplices each served 3 years in France. The 2 females were given suspended sentences due to the fact that they had kids. Mr. Wright skipped off to sunny Portugal, from where the US has failed to have him extradited. Over the years, living under the alias of José Luis Jorge dos Santos, Wright made money from selling gift items to tourists. He did a spot of bouncing in a nightclub, had a chicken joint at one point, and also taught basketball. By all accounts, he had a great life in Europe. He married a young translator, and the two had children together. Even though the Portuguese authorities arrested him in 2011, he's never been extradited and remains a wanted man in the US. The FBI states he should be considered armed and dangerous. That's not what Wright's lawyer thinks. who told a Guardian journalist in 2011 that his client is a caring father, a devoted husband, and an active humanitarian, organizer of banquets for the homeless, and basketball coach to inner-city kids. Wright later spoke to this journalist at his home in Portugal, saying, "This is a matter of life or death to me," often using the 70s parlance of "you dig" in between sentences. On his ankle, the Portuguese authorities had placed a monitoring bracelet. He told the journalist, "I've been working on it for all these years, and I'm still working on it, trying to accept who I am. I made a decision a long time ago to do something constructive for the rest of my life wherever I can, you dig? It's part of my repentance, to get rid of the regret, the suffering that I made other people go through, to be able to balance the scales." Wright is now 80. He never did any prison time in Portugal, and we're quite sure he won't be sent back to the US. What we do know is that he sure as hell won't be going on vacation to the US anytime soon. Okay, the last one, a highly educated mass murderer and an utterly confounding murder mystery. How is this one not a movie? How is it not 10 movies? Number 1. The Diplomat. William Bradford Bishop Jr., a Yale graduate and US government high roller, committed one of the most brutal acts of mass murder in American history. He graduated from Yale with a bachelor's degree in American Studies, going on to do a master's degree in Italian, as well as completing a master's in African Studies from UCLA. The world was his oyster, but it seems he didn't really like oysters. In the 1950s, he worked for US counterintelligence, but we don't know exactly what he did or saw during his work with the government. What we do know is that his stint in the intelligence world changed him. Being fluent in Italian, French, Spanish, and Serbo-Croatian, he was useful, later working as a diplomat for the US in various posts throughout the world, including lengthy stints in Africa and Italy. On March 1, 1976, Bishop came back to the US, working for the State Department in Washington. Now at age 40, he told his secretary he thought he was coming down with the flu and needed to go home. Reports say he was upset since he hadn't gotten the promotion he'd wanted. Police believe his next stop was the bank, where he withdrew $400, $2,163 in today's money. After that, he drove to the mall, where he bought a 2.5-gallon gasoline can and a ball-peen hammer. He then drove to a gas station and filled up his Chevrolet station wagon as well as the can. His next stop was the hardware store, where he purchased a pitchfork and a shovel. There's not many things you could do with that item combination. No one heard from him for a while after that, so on March 8th, police went around to his house, 8103 Lilystone Drive, in the Carter Rock Springs neighborhood of Bethesda, about 22 minutes away from DC by car. It was quiet, eerily quiet at the house. Police then spotted a trail of blood that led them from the driveway to the front door. When they went inside, the house was covered in blood. It was on the walls, all over the bedrooms, on sheets and pillows. There were human hairs, bits of flesh and bone, but no bodies. It was as if a werewolf had torn through the house. One of the officers later said, "Almost the entire ceiling and wall was completely splattered with blood. There was hardly a place you could put your hand where there wasn't blood splatterings. I've been a police officer for approximately 12 years, and this was the worst scene that I'd ever observed." So, where were the bodies? The answer is police found them smoldering on a fire about 200 miles away in eastern North Carolina. Bishop had dug a hole and thrown the remains in and then ignited the lot with the gasoline he'd bought. So the story goes. What was left of his family was soon identified as Bishop's wife, 38, his own mother, 67, and 3 sons, 5, 10, and 14. He bludgeoned them all to death. Police later said, "Our investigation shows that Mrs. Bishop was probably killed first. She was found beside a book, which she might have been reading at the time that she was killed. The children were probably killed next, followed by Bishop's mother. They were all killed with a blunt instrument, and none of the victims had an opportunity to defend themselves." On March 18th, Bishop's station wagon was found at an isolated campground in Elkmont, Tennessee. Inside it were dog biscuits, a shotgun, an axe, a bloody blanket, and a shaving kit containing Bishop's medication. It's very important to note that at the time of the murders, he'd been taking a strong medication used usually for sleep problems and anxiety. Bishop, it was discovered, had been seeing a shrink. He just disappeared after that. No one could figure it out. There were plenty of theories, some that involved possible top-secret work for the CIA, but the CIA, of course, has denied this. Sure, his life wasn't perfect. He was apparently not happy with a pen-pushing job after traveling much of the world, and he did get denied that promotion, but his family had money at least. There was nothing to suggest he disliked his family, at least not enough for him to massacre them in such a brutal way. This was overkill, suggesting intense hatred. He was about as close to the top of the labor food chain as it gets in government work. He was a winner. No one could figure it out. They still can't, but there is more to the story. As a man who worked for intelligence, Bishop knew how to keep a low profile. He had a diplomatic passport and quite possibly could have known how to make counterfeit documents. That makes sense when you consider he was previously a spy. In those days, diplomats were often spies too. He also knew how to fly small planes and had plenty of experience with the outdoors. He would be 87 by now. If you met him already, you might have seen him enjoy some Scotch whiskey or spicy foods. You'd have seen him perhaps with a dog. He loved dogs. You might have been privy to the 6-inch scar on his lower back. You couldn't have missed the cleft chin and the mole on his cheek. He's 6'1" and 180 pounds, and it's believed he might have gone to Italy, Belgium, England, Finland, the Netherlands, Germany, Greece, Spain, Sweden, or Switzerland. He's been seen, or thought to have been seen, quite a few times. In 1978, in Sorrento, Italy, a former colleague of Bishop's, Roy Harrell, said he came face-to-face with his old friend in a bus station restroom. Harrell was sure of it. "You don't generally forget old friends," he said. "I was washing my hands, and this bearded, disheveled-looking man came in. In my mind's eye, I took the beard and his grubby clothes off him, and I saw Brad Bishop I had seen coming out of the State Department. I followed him and watched him disappear down the cliffs going toward the boat landing where the boats go to Capri." Harrell said he'd actually gone up to him and said, "Hey, you're Brad Bishop, aren't you?" And the man responded in an American accent, "Oh, no," and got out of there fast. In 1979, another colleague, this time someone who worked with him in Africa, said she was absolutely certain she'd seen him in Stockholm, Sweden. Still, at that point, she didn't know he was wanted for murder. Then, in 1994, a person who'd known Bishop and his family when they lived in Bethesda said she definitely saw him on a train platform in Basel, Switzerland. The woman said, "All of a sudden, this sick feeling came over me. I realized it was Bradford Bishop. The very next day, I called the FBI. The last thing the guy said to me was, 'That's exactly the kind of place a fugitive would hang out.' They never contacted me again after that." There's more to the story than meets the eye, or we suspect there is. It was later discovered that before Bishop killed his family in the horrific manner he did, he'd been corresponding with a prison inmate, Albert Kenneth Bankston, who was serving time at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, for the 1970 armed robbery of the Citizens National Bank in Plain, Mississippi. How did Bishop know such a criminal? The letter was only discovered 10 years after the murder. By that time, Bankston had already died of cancer. The authorities had been criticized for this, since had they talked to Bankston earlier, the case could have likely been cracked by now. Also, for some strange reason, it took the FBI 38 years to put Bishop on their most wanted list. 531 fugitives have appeared on the list over the years, and 494 of them have been captured, but not Bishop, arguably one of the worst of the worst. The letter from Bankston to Bishop is in the WikiLeaks files today, but the handwriting is very difficult to decipher at first glance. It explicitly doesn't talk about murder, but these two guys' relationship could have held the key to the riddle. At one point in the letter, Bankston wrote, "Now in answer to your question, yes, I am most sure she is in North Carolina State Penitentiary." Was this in reference to a woman seen with Bishop in the days running up to the murders? Was Bishop using Bankston to help him find a killer for hire? Maybe in exchange for a counterfeit passport? At another point in the letter, Bankston writes, "I was only interested in Mexico and/or Central America, as you know." A man named David Paul Allen was mentioned in the letter, and in 1996, he told the Washington Post Bishop wanted a shooter. He was willing to spend good money and more. Robert Kiefer, who was working as a sheriff's deputy in Montgomery County, containing Bethesda, had also spent years turning over every stone in the case. He later said in an interview that he talked with Allen on the phone. Kiefer said, "Allen told us that Bishop had paid them some money to kill the family, and they were to come to the house under the guise of doing some gutter or home repair work. All of this was supposed to take place while he was over in Europe on a business trip. It seemed to me he paid them some cash and some jewelry." Kiefer went to talk to a man he suspected of being the hitman in question, but the man said killing kids was against his criminal code. Kiefer said he later tried to get another look at the file on Bankston, but the file was no longer available. The FBI said an agent was now in control. Kiefer said, "We tried to locate this agent, but nobody could even tell us this guy existed." Again, strange. What's interesting is on March 19, 2000, a woman named Lorraine Klepacki of Asheboro bought an old diary for $38 at a flea market at North Carolina's Greensboro Coliseum. On the front, it was written Bradford Bishop Diary. The woman's son looked that name up on the internet, and soon they were fascinated by what they had on their hands. Who knows if it was the Bradford Bishop, but it sure sounds like him. Here are some passages. February 1967. "If you're going to succeed in the foreign service, make ambassador before you're 50. Hold positions of responsibility. Constant dedication and considerable sacrifice of time and thought are required. Also February 1967, toxic degenerative psychoses, chronic low-level maniac involutional megalomania. On June 12, 1968, one should seize upon life and embellish it. We should state here again that Bishop had been seeing a psychiatrist. This man was Dr. Frank Caprio, but Caprio cited doctor-patient privilege and wouldn't talk about his relationship with Bishop to Montgomery cops. 1968. This accursed insomnia. It's amazing despite how lousy you feel all doped up, smoking a few cigarettes, etc. His last entry in 1971 states, "Your family grows more beautiful and you still stand on the threshold. Outwardly, your accomplishments are great. My, such symbols, promotions, citations, languages, degrees. Still, you stand on the threshold. You have soared to the heights and plummeted each time to the depths." Was this diary a real thing? Was it planted by the CIA to make it look like Bishop was falling apart? In the world of intelligence, anything is possible. People who've worked on the case the most seem to think that anyway. Raymond M. Kite, sheriff of Montgomery County, has spent more time on the Bishop case than most. In an interview about this with Moco 360, a Montgomery County bi-monthly magazine, he said the case is so strange and so very mysterious that sometimes he suspects Bishop was part of the CIA's MK-Ultra trials when the agency used hallucinogenic substances to try to control people's minds, sometimes in an effort to make them extremely violent. Bishop was certainly in the right place at the right time for that. The sheriff said, "I'm not so sure this didn't happen to Bishop. How else," he said, "do you go into your house and bludgeon your wife, children, and mother?" Still, there is no proof. Those are just his musings. There's one more we'll add to this tale because it obviously isn't weird enough already. In 2022, a woman who'd done a genealogy DNA test found out her biological father was none other than Bradford Bishop. The FBI confirmed it. They looked almost identical, too. The woman, who'd let her cousin track down her family, excitedly asked her cousin when the result was in, "Is he famous?" The cousin replied, well, yeah, I'll let you figure that out." Now you absolutely need to watch 50 Insane Facts About the CIA You Never Knew, or have a look at this creepy and bloody tale, The Pig Farmer, Canada's Most Evil Serial Killer.